Welcome back to Mystara, everybody. Sorry I'm running a few days late. I had some issues this weekend that kept me from recording. So this video is for everybody that's not running around like a freed prisoner as the lockdowns are starting to get lifted, whether we're supposed to be outside or not. This week we are looking at the Mystaran monsters in other settings, because for the longest all Mystara did was provide new monsters to other settings rather than use the same monsters in, I don't know, Mystara. But I'm not bitter. In fact, in 2 weeks I'll have a special treat for you for the 3rd anniversary show. But for now, I'm going to be bitter. I'm Mr. Welch, and we're looking at where our monsters have been hiding since our last book came out in 1996. I'm grabbing these in order that I found them in other books, so it's going to be a little bit haphazard. I'm also not including the extra planar stuff, because there's no reason why those shouldn't appear in multiple settings. So our first canon immigrant is the Kopru, those half-fish, half-walrus, and evil nasties that once dominated Mystara before the elves developed their resistance to spells and overthrew them. You know, the Kopru, the big bads from the Isle of Dread. Well, instead of sitting around simmering like good abominations in Dragon 354, they were instead turned to the worship of Demogorgon. Instead of being the haughty slave lords that were waiting for their next shot, now they were a race savaged by disease and playing second banana to the Aboleth, who occupy the same slot as the Kopru did. They are still well known in the areas they rule, but their decline was due to illness and starvation rather than slave result. And they gave up on that whole shtick about believing themselves to be the most powerful creatures in existence, and they sold their souls to demons instead. Nagpa probably got the biggest change in motivation and background when they were introduced to 5th edition's Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Demi-Humans. Our Nagpa were the result of an immortal's curse, trapping former wizards into a twisted form for Jim Henson villains, caught in an eternal cycle of death and rebirth without the ability to feel happiness, joy, or even just satisfaction. They weren't evil so much as they were bitter. Well, ignore all that backstory, because now instead of the immortals, the Raven Queen, probably the only new god that survived 4th edition, turned a cabal of wizards into Nagpa. Now they're truly evil in nature, there's a lot less of them, and they are vastly more powerful. Mystara and Nagpa were middle-level monsters at best, unless you gave them some character levels. Faerun Nagpa are on par with greater demons in power. Gone is the cycle of cursed rebirth. Instead, they're just big bads that have to destroy cities so they can steal magic spells. Nightwalkers are the only one of the Nightshades to make it to 5th edition, appearing right after the Nagpa in Morty's Guide to the Forgotten Realms, Elves, Dwarves, and Demons. The Walkers made it, but the Flyers and the Crawlers didn't get the call. In Mystara, Nightwalkers were the right-hand minion to entropic immortals. If you pissed off Alphax one too many times, he dispatched a Nightwalker with your name on its lips. Now they're reduced to an automatic spawn when you enter the negative material plane. You go in, they go out. They share the same nastiness, though their motivations are lessened. No longer are they assassins targeting candidates for immortality. Now they're just mindless death dealers whose primary reason for existence is pretty much accidental. And of course, everybody knows about the Tortle. There was a big deal about Tortles coming to 5th edition because it gave Mystara fans that glimmer of hope that we might be able to get some new material. Our Tortles were communal, patient, and more importantly, the dominant life form across large parts of the Savage Coast. They were originally part of the Savage Coast module, but they got their time in the spotlight with the Dragon Magazine's 6 and 7 adventure, Tortles of the Purple Sage. They are slow, they're ponderous, they're all too often frustrating, but they're still good at heart. Skip to them getting borged into the Forgotten Realms. Now they're natives of Chult, and a large number of them are martial artists. They go from the plains of the Savage Coast to the deep jungles of Faerun. They're also now chaotic good and live almost 400 years instead of the Mystaran 40. That's actually quite an improvement. In the handbook, I always raise the lifespan to about 1,000 years. It's not like anybody dies of old age in the game anyways. Seriously, they're turtle people. Give them lifespans to reflect that. We've got giant turtles today that were brought back by Charles Darwin still kicking. Never understood the ridiculously short turtle lifespans. Not much to talk about in the section with the Tortle package that includes several Mystara cameo monsters with the Geonid, Topi, and Decapus. The Decapus is greatly reduced in absolute terror as it only gets 2 attacks and only one of them is the tentacle attack. It's got a ton of hit points, but it can't deal damage to save its life. Cue the rant about 5th edition hit point bloat here. Geonids are now natives of the plane of Earth, but they're just as elusive as they were back in Mystara. Topi are back as the evil voodoo doll zombies, though there's not much to talk about any of these 3, because unlike the Tortle, each of them only get a single paragraph explaining their background in the Forgotten Realms. Next up is the Choker, and I'll be honest, I included this one just for completion. It wasn't a very popular monster in Mystara, it's just an ambush encounter with some low-level monsters. Nobody really got that worried by Chokers. In Morty's Guide to Inserting Everything from Every Plane into Faerun, they got the Mook treatment as well, with moderate armor class, crap hit points, and the same shtick. So, same monster, new setting, same tricks. Not much to talk about. The epic Temple of Death gave us the Juggernaut, massive wood or stone constructs that would barrel down narrow hallways and try to squash you flat, or you could find them leading the Master's armies at the head of the assault, acting as magical tanks to break lines. Tomb of Annihilation took the stone Juggernaut and placed it into the realm, the wood Juggernaut still missing in action. The function's still the same, though apparently they sometimes become homes to mimics, so they get pseudopod arms to make them even more dangerous. The next two aren't so much as relocating the monsters, but taking the monsters in a new, more powerful, and incredibly terrifying way. The 3.5 Epic Handbook decided to grab a couple of Mystara monsters and make them epic. First up was the Brain Collector, the Nelthugo. Turns out the Brain Collector you fought in Castle Amber was just the larval stage. The adult stage is much, much nastier. It can store more brains. The spells it gains from taking those brains go up in power as well. You're not dealing with level 2 spells anymore. The Collector gets its own spells and new abilities. In short, an adult Brain Collector is there to TPK the party, and that makes me happy. The Brain Collector has always been a great idea for a monster, but it was wimpy. It's Mystara's answers to the Mind Flayer, but it stops being scary right around, I guess, 5th or 6th level. Letting it grow into a larger, nastier version makes it the abomination it deserved to be. If the Brain Collector causes you to rethink your strategy, what they did to the Black Ball makes you have to change pants. Mystara players always snicker when people ask what's the deadliest creature in D&D, because they'll always tell you the same thing. Ever heard of Balors, Tarrasques, Great Worm Red Dragons? Pfft, wimps. Wimps the lot of them. We've got the Black Ball, a massive ball of nothingness that wants to turn you also into so much nothingness. Where you had to do something really stupid to die to a Black Ball in Mystara, in the Epic Handbook they managed to make it deadlier. I know what you're thinking. Are you telling me they weaponized a 6-foot wide, 32 challenge rating sentient sphere of annihilation? Is that what you are telling me? And yes, they did. Now it can try to suck you in. It pursues with a purpose. It's called the Umbral Blot now. It's explained that this is a weapon used by gods on gods. Sure, it has hit points. It even has an armor class. And it also vaporizes anything to touch it, so good luck hitting it with an arrow or a spell. And it can teleport. Remember that well when you think you're going to kite it. Sure, getting chased by a genocidal 8-ball sounds like a great time, but at least it one-shots the Tarrasque. Those are all the monsters from Mystara that have made it into other editions and settings. I'm probably missing a few, but a lot of them were introduced in 1st edition at the same time, so I wasn't going to do any overlap there. Well, it's time for a new topic, and the next one on our list is playing Blackmoor characters in the known world. This was hinted at in the DDA series, and it's certainly possible, but what would that entail? So choose wisely, and remember, until next time, good writers borrow and great writers steal.